Chapter 19. Dr. Gwen Kassler's office was on the third floor of the city building, a bland, crypt-like block of cement 2 streets from the center of downtown Albuquerque. The whole building was painted a cigarette-stained brown. Long, empty hallways were divided by thick glass walls. Kassler's office didn't make any effort to stray from the pseudo 70s motif. Her tables were formica, her chairs pleather. All she had for reading material was highlights for children in the Albuquerque Journal. Up in the corner above her door was an old mid-80s OCTV camera. I watched its eye focus. I shifted in my chair. "Miss Tota," her secretary stammered, looking confused. "Tota Cheatney, yes, I have an appointment." "Go ahead and go in," she said. I poked my head in the office cautiously. There was a giant pink brain model on the doctor's desk that really centered the room. Another CCTV camera panned to my chair and stopped. Dr. Kassler was wiping her hands with a paper towel. "Can I call you Rita?" She extended her hand, then proceeded to dust crumbs from her blouse. "I apologize. I had to have lunch on the run this afternoon." "I understand how that is," I said. My chair squeaked. "I'm surprised that you had me in here so soon." "Well, I understand you have been under a lot of duress lately." She opened a file on her desk. "Sergeant Severs described you as hallucinating 2 days ago. Is that true?" "I don't think I would describe them as hallucinations." Why had I told Angie? What had I been thinking? I think what was going on the other night was best described as fatigue. Dr. Kassler sat quietly, staring at me. I was uncomfortable. The camera in the corner buzzed. It's my job to make sure that our officers are prepared for the job they are undertaking. "You've been with the crime scene unit for about 5 years, is that correct?" "About." "And where are you from?" "I grew up on the reservation, on the Navajo reservation, the western side of the state." I knew she had this information in front of her. Why was she asking me? "I used to work out there after my residency at the IHS in Fort Defiance." Dr. Kassler seemed pleased to have made a connection with me, flashing a smile. "So what brought you into this kind of work? Aren't Navajos scared of death?" "Aren't we all?" I answered. She wrote something on her notepad. "Why did you take this job?" "Because I needed a job after college. I couldn't find a job anywhere else doing photography." "And why have you stayed?" "What do you mean?" I asked. It seemed like an odd question. "I'm just curious. I imagine it's not easy, the work you do." She looked up from her notepad. "As a Navajo, the work you do must be distressing to you." "I don't believe in all that," I answered. "It's superstition." "Do you believe in God?" she asked. "No," I said. That is also superstition." She wanted the truth, so she was going to get it. "Sergeant Severs mentioned that these hallucinations that have been having have to do with ghosts. Do you want to talk to me about these ghosts or spirits that you're seeing?" I sat in silence for a few seconds, my chair squeaking again as my foot drummed out an uneven beat. I was tired. I worked almost 50 hours that week. Work has been busy. "So you didn't tell Sergeant Severs you see ghosts?" I can't remember what I said to her. I watched her pen. I was delirious. "Is working 50 plus hours a week the normal thing in your unit?" "Not every week. Hopefully, but Albuquerque is getting bigger and the crime hasn't showed any sign of stopping." She paused and poured herself water from a plastic bottle. "Is most of the work you do homicide?" "Not always. Suspicious deaths, suicides, or car accidents." I wondered what she was getting at. "But those all seem to involve an unalive body. Am I right to assume that?" "Yes." Would you be interested in transferring out of this unit? Her pin was already pressed to the paper. Maybe do something else in the crime unit, ballistics, or are you asking me this because I'm Navajo? Well, no. She straightened in her seat. I'm just a little surprised to see a Navajo so long on this kind of unit, that's all. It had become quiet in her office with just the bliss of the heater vents. What if I told you I've been like this for years? Seeing ghosts, I mean, what would you do? You've been having hallucinations for years? She scribbled furiously. When did they start? You didn't answer my question. I was angry at that point. I'm not hallucinating, but I have a feeling that you think I'm going crazy. I don't know what I would do, Rita. What do you think I should recommend? How do you feel about this whole situation? Behind Dr. Kassler, Irma sat on a stool, shaking her head, her feet resting on the doctor's file cabinet. I'm ready to work, doctor. I don't know what else to tell you. And I'm in the middle of something right now that needs to be finished. I got up to leave. You need to speak with me if you intend on going back to work, she said. I hope that in the interest of keeping your job, you would answer a few questions about your current state of mind. I sat. Aside from being tired and a little hungry, there is nothing wrong with me. Irma eased up to her ear. You need to let her go, doctor. She has work to do. Your co-workers are concerned about your behavior over the last few weeks. She put her notepad down. Are you taking any medications that we should know about? I'm not taking any drugs, Dr. Kassler. My face churned with heat. I'm under some pressure right now, that's all. Irma threw herself back onto the stool, frustrated. The chair creaked. Dr. Kassler turned to look. Why don't you just tell her that I'm sitting here, Irma offered. I bet that would convince her. Do you want to talk to me about that, Rita? What is it that you need to take care of? I need to wrap up this case. They're waiting for some photos. I really didn't think this was going to be a full shrink session, but I need to leave. Irma and Dr. Kassler stared at me in silence until Irma's ghost rose from the stool and moved toward the door. Dr. Kassler turned to see what I was thinking about. Maybe I'm just distracted. I followed Irma's ghost out the door. Maybe it's finally time that you help me find out how I ended up unalive, Irma said. Chapter 20. I was a senior when Mom got sick. Her kidneys were failing and no one could figure out why. Mom wanted to pretend it wasn't happening, but I could see that she was in pain. She ate less and less and had to go to dialysis more and more. I just wanted to stay with her to make sure she was okay. We started playing hooky all the time. She would call into work and I would call in for me at school. Mom had it down. She's been throwing up since last night, Mom would report. We can come pick her homework. We would pay to see one movie at the first morning showing at the multiplex, then sneak from one show to another until we couldn't take it anymore. Then we would go out and buy horrible food and rent bad movies and go home. There was no mention of homework or schedules. It was just me and my mom all day, every day for a couple of weeks. I was always eager to drive, so my mom and I went all over. We drove for miles to ruins, to the top of the mountain ranges, to churches and ashrams up in northern New Mexico. We talked about movies and books as we drove home in the orange of sunset, like we were enduring friends. I learned a lot about her during those 3 weeks. You're going to go to college, aren't you? Mom asked on one of those days. She sat in the dirt and sketched a small drawing of the canyon below. That was the idea. Isn't that what you wanted? What do you want? She stopped her sketch. I want stability and I want to fix Grandma's garage. Mom laughed. She turned away from me and dug into her knapsack a green bag full of holes. She brought out a square of fabric wrapped around the body of a slightly used Hasselblad 500 cm. She held it with both hands and looked out into the breezy canyon. I waited to hear the snap of the exposure. Instead, I heard nothing, just the building of the wind beneath our perch. You know, I took a picture of your father with a camera just like this. Well, older, of course, and heavier. My father? I was surprised. I thought I had just hatched. There was an uneasy silence for a few seconds. I never heard you talk about him before. Not since I was a baby. You can't remember being a baby? Mom said. That's impossible. I can do a lot of things that I've never told you about. This was the first time I had ever challenged my mother. I didn't like it. I can remember, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry I ruined your plans. I rose and shook the dust from my jeans. I'm sorry. She handed the camera to me. This is yours now. You'll have my cameras, all of them. I was stunned. When did you buy this, Mom? It looks brand new. A while back. She stared at the camera in my hands. I thought about getting back into portraits. You know, just mess around with a nice camera again. I took it out to Grandma's last week. I have a nice print of her in front of the house. I'll show you later. Mom, you need to keep this. I pushed the camera back onto her lap. You can take a picture of me right now. Do my portrait out. Here. I was excited as I turned around and around, searching for the best backdrop. My mom stepped a few feet into the right. Right there, stop. Her hair rippled in the wind. She put the camera on top of the flat rock and pressed. I could hear the shutter open and close enough through the relentless wind on my back. After that, my mom showed me how the camera worked, and I was able to frame a great shot of her with nothing but heavens behind her, a sea of blue and white. She was so beautiful. When they started calling and threatening my graduation date, I finally went back to school. It felt weird to leave my mom at home alone, to leave her sick like she was. I'll be fine, Rita, Mom said. I just go to school. The first day that I returned from my sickness, I was summoned to the counselor's office. I was only a month out from graduation, and it probably hadn't been the best timing for a 2-week absence. Mr. Kephart wore shiny ties and silk shirts and combed his hair into a 2-inch black helmet. He loved to eat peppermints and always kept a huge jar of those soft ones on the desk. Want some candy? He pointed at the jar. I shook my head. You're about to graduate. Aren't you even the tiniest bit excited? I guess I am. I haven't really thought about it. I noticed hummingbirds outside his window. Rita, everything okay at home? Plans still the same? Mr. Kephart rummaged through my files. You still going to do that photo schooling? He couldn't remember. In San Francisco, no, I decided to stay home. When did this happen? He said. Last month, I closed my backpack and began to eye the door. My mom's just having a hard time. She's sick. Oh, he shifted in his seat. Is she okay? He looked concerned. She was okay when I left her this morning, I said. Let me know if you need anything. He wrote a number on the back of his card. That's my home phone if you need to call me outside of school. I heard the scratch of a record on the turntable when I came home. It just crackled and whirled, then popped. Over and over, I knew something was wrong. I ran through the door to find my mom on the floor. I tried to shake her awake, but her eyes stayed shut. I called the ambulance. On the ride to the hospital, my mom's eyes opened to small crescents, and she smiled and took my hand. She was entering late-stage renal failure. Her liver was also not working, and her creatine levels were through the roof. It was all just happening so fast. I called Grandma that night, and she was at the house by dawn. I was thankful that Mom's doctor was in a new hospital wing. The older hospitals were the worst as far as seeing ghosts goes. We made the trip to the hospital early every morning, and while the dialysis machine performed its magic, I would go to school. Mom and Grandma would sit there and watch soap operas and do crossword puzzles. But my mom wasn't getting any better. The doctors had no idea how her kidneys had become so weak. One was barely functioning and the other had stopped functioning altogether. My mom was in her late 30s, so her diagnosis left the doctors with no explanation. They tried to question her about exposure to chemicals, gave her a million tests, but it was a mystery. They started talking about finding a donor. She can have mine, I said as I watched the dialysis machine work. Hey kid, you can't give me your kidneys. What if something happens to you? Who's gonna take care of me? She smiled and nudged my elbow. I'm old enough to decide for myself. I couldn't look at her. Happy birthday, she said. What a horrible way to spend it. Why don't you and Grandma go out and get something to eat? And when is graduation? In about 3 days, right? Yes, but don't worry about it. I didn't think you would be up to going. I could feel myself starting to cry. I'm going. There's nothing you can do about that, she laughed. I put my head in her lap. Grandma woke me up on an hour later, the machine still whirled. We left the hospital knowing that Mom's days were numbered. At home, I stared at her constantly, waiting for her to become faint or weak, but she only smiled at me and I endured. I convinced Mom to let me give her my kidney. We were scheduled for the test to make sure that I was a viable donor. Stop worrying, she said, smoothing the frown lines on my forehead. Pretty soon I'll have a sexy new kidney. But 2 days after graduation, Mom didn't wake up. I walked into her bedroom, and even though she looked like she was sleeping peacefully, I know she was gone. I sat and stared at her in the bed for 15 minutes and waited for her ghost to come see me. She never came. The one person I wanted to see, and she wasn't coming. Grandma walked into the bedroom and immediately knew. She just stood in silence with tears coming down her face. I can't see her, Grandma. I was crying. I can't see her. Why can't I see her? Grandma and I sat there for almost an hour before we called the ambulance. When we heard the knock at the door, Grandma stood and hugged me so hard. My hands arched. I think my mom had made her peace with her body. She was in pain. Now the pain is gone. Grandma was right. It was me who wanted her there. I wanted to cut myself open and put my kidney inside her to bring her back with the electricity of my own flesh, but she was gone. There was nothing I could do. It took Grandma and me a month to clean out the house. We still owed a lot on the mortgage, so I decided to go back home with Grandma. When all was said and done, my life had been reduced to a few boxes and 2 suitcases of clothes. Mom's car was paid off, but we left it in the city, storing it in a friend's driveway until I came back for school in the fall. I had all my cameras with me, and they rode up front in my grandma's pickup on the way back home. I took a picture of Grandma in front of our house before we drove away. I used Mom's Hasselblad and noticed that only 3 shots remained. I knew I had to save them. The house looked so lonely and we pulled away. The windows were wet with condensation of every morning, but they were empty, the glass reflecting the image of whoever was staring in. Houses are just like bodies. When there is no spark, no life phase to fill them with warmth. They're just vessels. Chapter 21. The day after my session with Dr. Kassler, I spent my morning sorting through the work of the last week. I cataloged the photos, filled out forms, and tried to find a way to work my clues into a narrative. It wasn't easy, but most of the time the photos could tell the story. I would be turning in my reports on the rollover and the drive-by soon. I would be turning in Judge Winter's case and Irma's file too. But something was still tugging at me. Something was still incomplete. It was Irma herself. Irma's ghost picked at her fingernails. I've been cheated. I don't know what happened to me. 1 minute I'm leaving for work and the next I can't breathe because I'm falling. I don't know what happened to you either, Irma. I only see what you can show me, I exhausted. Now give me a minute to go save what is left of my job. I gathered my files and headed for the crime lab. Dr. Kassler had sent her report over to Samuels almost immediately. By the afternoon, they had me scheduled for a sit-down with Samuel and Angie. I had a feeling that all of it wasn't going to go very well. As I walked down the hallway to Samuel's office, I could feel eyes on me. There was probably a pull on how long I had left. I thought I was very cooperative. Angie Severs was standing in Samuel's office with her hands on her hips. Apparently you are refuting my statement about your behavior at the scene and at the hospital. I saw what was going on with my own eyes. Now you're calling me a liar. As far as I'm concerned, you're not fit for duty. We're suspending you, Rita. Samuels laid a page in front of me. You will be reevaluated in 3 months. My heart raced with the panic of losing my job. Reevaluated for what? What am I supposed to do for 3 months? You should have thought of that before you put every case that you've ever worked on in jeopardy. Samuels grabbed his pipe and chewed the tip. All this talk of ghosts and visions only cloud our path of evidence. People will think we're having seances to get through case files. And here you are, one of my best investigators, turning into some kind of damn psychic detective. I've never done anything that would jeopardize my cases. Never, Angie, you know this. I turned to her, but she was just as angry as Samuels. In the corner of my eye, I could see that Irma had followed me in. She stood against the wall listening. Right now, all of this is unknown outside of this office. I want to keep it that way. Samuels pointed at the paperwork. You need to sign this. It guarantees you will continue to be evaluated by Dr. Kassler once a month until your suspension is over. The paper was freshly printed and already signed by Samuels. What about the cases I've been working on, Judge Winters and Irma Singleton on the overpass? Miss Singleton's case was ruled an unaliving to herself. Angie said, a unaliving? Already there's a ruling on the case? From the corner of the office, a gravely scream came from Irma's outstretched mouth, so loud that I winced, trying my best to keep my eyes open on Angie. We will need all of your storage devices, photos, diagrams, she said. Anything related to the case you're working on. S-U-I-C-I-D-E? Irma continued screaming. S-U-I-C-I-D-E? I handed Angie my files, my stomach churning. This is all for the best, Rita. Angie placed her hand on my shoulder. Take this time to rest. There'll be no rest for you, Rita. Irma unleashed another scream. I didn't unalive myself. 5 years of work was slipping away from me, and there was nothing I could do about it. Maybe I could find a better job, something 9 to 5, taking pictures of school kids or birds or anything. Irma Singleton was turning into the biggest wrecking ball I'd ever encountered. She sat with me in silence, riding in the back seat of my car. Her rage had drained us both. Once I get home, all I can do is lie on the couch and close my eyes. I didn't care who was in there with me. I just needed to rest. I should have known that wouldn't last long. The knock at the door was not going to go away, no matter how hard I shut my eyes. Let us in, Rita. It was Shanice. Come on, sister, open the door. And Philip, my only two friends. Philip lived in my building, always smelled of expensive cologne, dressed impeccably, and was a great person to talk to. He also had no interest in girls. It was a shame. Shanice was my sister. After years of separation because of our junior high school jailhouse experience, we had managed to find each other again. The two of them had become quick friends and bar buddies. I'm not here. Go away, I yelled. I took my blankets over my head but could hear my locks opening anyway. Shanice knew where my extra keys was. She crashed with me all the time when she was between places, just like another native relative. She was known to show up wherever the hell she felt like, stay a few days, then leave without notice. I threw my balled up sock at Philip's head as he yanked off my blanket. Shanice was already looking through the photos on my table, mixing up the stacks and piles, grimacing at a few. Where are those pictures that you took of me last week? I called you like 3 times and you never answered. Shanice was taller than Philip and I, especially in the 4-inch heels. She was now a part-time actress, catching old roles in small films and plays that roll through the town. She had pure, impeccable olive skin, well-shaped eyebrows, and a supremely sculptured hair, which made her a simple, beautiful every girl. I pulled a red folder from the drawer, then threw it on the table. Red for the devil. Shanice and Philip were on it within seconds. The animals. Look at you, Shanice, Philip gushed. I lay back down and covered my head with a pillow. These are wonderful, Rita. Thank you, Shanice said. Philip tore the pillow off my head. Those photographs are perfect, Rita. Have you ever thought about being a photographer? You think? My head pounded, but I smiled anyway. Let's go celebrate, Shanice, squeezing me, feeling my ribcage. When was the last time you ate, Shanice? I'm fine, I squirmed. Philip was already looking in the refrigerator, mustard and beet. He shook his head. Please, you two. I just got home from getting suspended from work. Wait, what? Shanice shrieked, not making my headache any better. Yes, I've been suspended for 3 months and I have to go see a shrink if I want to get my job back. Holy shit. What did you do? Got worked too hard, that's what. I had a little episode on the scene and now I'm crazy. Now what? Shanice said. Are you just gonna stay here for 3 months and sleep? Before I knew it, they were dragging me into my room, forcing off my crinkled work khakis and dusty black shirt. Shanice pushed me into the shower, then she dressed me in a few clothes I didn't know I owned and rushed me out the door. After going a few floors down, I glanced back up and saw Mr. Santalanes watching me from the ledge of the top floor. We walked up the new hipster bar on the corner of 2nd and Gold and sat just inside the front windows. The city in the dark was sometimes more appetizing than it was during the harsh desert-like sky. In the dark, the city was cavernous and strong and full of souls of my ancestors. I felt them every day, but especially at night. They didn't talk to me. It wasn't that way with them. I just knew they were there. The bar was loud and crowded. The small dance floor pulsed at the back of the long, thin room. Do you want one drink or two? Philip asked. I couldn't even answer. Right? 2 drinks. He walked into the darkness of vibrating bodies and conversations. Drinks in hand, Philip vented about his grumpy clients, and Shanice expounded upon the new guy she met at her last job, some actor who was following her around like a lost puppy. That was not out of the ordinary. But he's from Utah, so I might need to make some trips up there. But whatever it takes. She tugged at her earlobe, stroking and pulling, something she did when she was serious. Oh, and by the way, I need to stay with one of you guys for a few days. She sat back and lit a cigarette. You know we have lives, right? Philip said. Rita doesn't. They stare at me. Yeah, wherever I'm never home again, I said. Can I buy you a drink? A voice called out across our table. Over the roar of music, no one replied. Rita. Shanice directed her eyes toward the men standing by our table. Can this gentleman buy you a drink? I guess. Just reason to assume the drink was for Shanice or Philip for that matter. They were just as shocked as I was. Me? Yes, if that's okay. Sure, why not? He seemed nice enough and wasn't dressed like a lawyer. Do you want to join us? I presented the empty chair at the end of the table, which he took and sat down. My name is Chris. He extended his hand out to each of us. I just moved here about 5 weeks ago for work and school. And what is it that you do? Chris. Philip smiled broadly when Shanice jabbed him in the rib. I'm a land surveyor, but I'm going to school right now for engineering. I've been working so much that this is the first time I've been able to get out and talk to someone. Chris was tall and had broad shoulders and semi-long hair that hung into the eyes. I kept catching him staring at me, then looking away when I looked back. It was a kind of interesting. Well, you're in luck, Chris. Philip stood and pulled Shanice's hand. Our friend Rita here needs some company because we're going to go for a dance and go home, right, Shanice? Well, see you later, Rita. Shanice was already dancing as Philip dragged her out in the crowd. She pointed to Chris's head and opened her mouth wide. So, what do you do? Chris smiled at me. I'm a photographer. I remembered my afternoon. Well, you're not a photographer anymore? He sat down across the table. No, I'm still a photographer. I just found out I'm starting a 3-month unplanned hiatus from a job this afternoon. Do you want another drink? He raised his hand for the waiter. Maybe one or more. We sat at the table for 2 more hours until the lights blinked off and on. Philip and Shanice had long since grabbed themselves out the door. Chris was smart and for some reason wanted her all about me. I kept it simple. He liked to read and go to the movies, things I also love to do, but rarely found the time for anyone. When we left the bar, we staggered out into the winter air, tugging at our scarves and laughing into the cold. He refused to let me walk home alone. We had about 7 blocks to go before we came to my apartment building. The streets were glistening from the icy rain and snow that had fallen during our hours at the bar. Except for a few passing taxis, we were alone in downtown Albuquerque. A faint hint of police sirens cried out from miles away, and one lonely wet dog skittered by, turning to look at us, then walking into the empty street. Chris moved into the echo of my building with me and shuffled the 5 stories to my apartment. By the time we got to the door, we were both out of breath. Thank you for bringing me home, I smiled. Any time. He raised his coat collar. I have to leave for a little over a week for work tomorrow. Maybe we can see a movie when I come back. I would like that. I felt so awkward and small, I didn't know what to say. As he moved in closer to me and pulled me to him, I could only feel a flood of heat as I kissed his lips. I think it surprised both of us, but once that had happened, I couldn't help but bring him through the door with me. We didn't separate from each other for hours and didn't say a word. I felt the shame in knowing that I had only met this man about 5 hours ago and had only his word to trust. For all I knew, he was an unaliver, a sociopath, or a narcissist. But right now, I didn't care. There was something about him that reminded me of home, of warmth and deep embrace. He kissed me, nuzzling his hot breath into my neck. He knew just where to touch me, and there was nothing I could do to fight it, so I didn't. He flooded over me like a warm light. I hadn't been this close to anyone in years, but I welcomed all of it, then wound myself around and slept a deep and unwavering sleep to the sound of his breath. Shortly after, I began to dream. In the dream, I sat on the swings in Nakai Park, a sparse collection of aging playground equipment. Next to me was Irma. Our feet carved parallel tracks into the ground. Snow began to fall just as Irma disappeared into an abyss, leaving me rocking in the swing. The front of Grandma's house appeared before me just as easily as the swing had suspended itself from the nothingness of the sky. Snow and frost covered every leaf and rock as I ran into the garage door. Grandma stood in the open doorway of her kitchen, the hot liquid of her coffee sending clouds of steam out of the back door screen. She looked out into the vast white and cried. Her face did not turn to me. I pushed her front door open and walked into the winter nothing where the sky and the ground were indistinguishable. There was no horizon for me to find my way. I panicked and turned to follow the path I had made, but my own tracks had vanished, covered by the blowing snow on my back. It was then that I noticed the light in the distance. It moved quickly. I had to shield my eyes against its yellow glare. As it came closer, I realized it was the red truck. It was moving again, the evil ghost of a horrible memory. It slowed and the window rolled down. Get in, Gloria barked. I'm not waiting for you, you know, her boyfriend offered. I looked through the window, trying to see his face, but he was only a shadow in the darkness. A voice came from nowhere. No matter how hard I tried, I could never remember what that man looked like. The dream did not want to help me remember either. I used the door to pull myself in the truck. Where are we, Gloria? I asked. It was dark outside, but I could see the lights of traffic passing by. We were moving. Shh. Gloria put her finger over her mouth. Rita, take my picture. Irma put her hand over Gloria's mouth and laughed. The voices echoed between dream and reality. My eyes opened sticky and tortured. There Gloria sat, her head wound fresh as the day she died, her gaze strong and intense. I could smell her like sweet corn in the exhaust of the road. Gloria here in my bedroom was Irma's ghost. Gloria seemed unable to speak. Rita, take my picture. Irma's anger boiled. This time her voice was deep and sinister. The force of it shook me awake. I looked over at Chris, who was still in a deep sleep. I couldn't stay in that bed, no matter how much I wanted to. Rita, Irma yelled, then pushed Gloria out of her way. She lunged at me, trying to reach for my hand, but I turned and ran into my bathroom, slamming the door behind me. I pushed my face against the linoleum on the bathroom floor and peered beneath the door. Nothing. Maybe it was the booze or the lack of sleep. I was seeing things. Then Irma knocked hard. Rita! The knocking was constant until it beat matched the pulsing of my heart. I feared that the wood in the door might splinter. I watched 4 spots of blood from my nose appear on the bathroom floor as the walls of my vision closed in. I lay down in a panic and went to sleep. Chapter 22. Grandma sat beside me in the truck, her head moving back and forth with the shifting traffic. As Grandma's truck jetted toward Gallup, I felt the weightlessness of home and smiled at the landmarks that still stood. Nothing had changed. As I drove us toward the sun, Grandma's chin touched her chest, her snores moving in and out. I couldn't believe that I had spent so much time away from home. That haunting connection I had to this land had become weak in my time away. Phone calls replaced visits. I don't want you coming to see me out here, Grandma would say. There is nothing for you. This was her mantra. Grandma enjoyed some of the comforts of the city. She never denied that. She loved to go to the grocery store most of all because there was so many more good vegetables in the markets, beautiful bunches of lettuce, brightly colored fruit. But when I offered to bring them out to her, she always claimed she had plenty and insisted on coming to visit instead of sometimes bringing Mr. Bittilli along for the ride. It's too hot out there, Grandma explained, or it's too cold and the roads are bad. I knew she was just keeping me away. There was only one Christmas that we spent at Grandma's house, the Christmas when I was 12 years old. Grandma knew it was going to snow for Christmas, knew how much I loved the snow, and made sure that I was there. On Christmas Eve, the snow began to fall at about 6 o'clock in the evening and didn't let up. When I woke on Christmas morning, the snow came up to my hips and I was packed all the way to the screen door. I made a path for Grandma out to her truck with the ash shovel from the fireplace. I brought in 6 or 7 armfuls of wood from the garage. We were stuck in the house for 2 days, stoking the fire until the sun came out and made this land as bright as eternity. The devil is whipping his wife, Grandma said, and looked into the sky. I ran out to play in the snow and saw the ghost of my cousin Gloria in the haze of white. I called out to her. I saw her head turn to look, then she disappeared into nothing. Maybe it was just me wishing that I saw her. Unfortunately, Grandma heard me. I still remember what she said. You talking to ghosts is gonna come back and bite you like a snake. Do you hear me? Like a snake. She turned and went back inside. I felt the sting of sun and snow on my cheeks and followed Grandma into the house. All these years later, I realized she was right. When I pulled into the driveway, Grandma was still fast asleep, head against the window, her purse in her lap with her hands perfectly folded over the leather. Grandma's grizzled dog, Zoe, greeted us with a faint bark, her fur matted with reservation dust. When I got out of the car, she jumped and barked at my feet until I paid attention. I couldn't believe I was home. I pulled Mom's camera out of my backpack in the bed of Grandma's truck and carried it with me. The dirt under my feet welcomed me, yielding as my weight pushed into the clay. I walked up to Grandma's gate and took it all in, breathing the deepest breath I could, absorbing the comforts beneath the mountains. I snapped a picture of Grandma's house, the front walkway, the white mailbox with Gallup Independent written on its side, and Zoe, her bottom teeth protruding from her mouth. I went back to the truck and woke Grandma from her deep sleep. I strapped her purse on one shoulder and held her hand all the way to the entrance to steady her gait. The door opened easily. I went back to the truck and woke Grandma from her deep sleep. I strapped her purse on one shoulder and held her hand all the way to the entrance to steady her gait. The door opened easily. Grandma, I've told you to make sure to lock the door before you leave. What if somebody tried to break in while you were gone? I was nervous, looking around every corner of the house for whatever scatter had taken up residence. Better than That is a city you talking, dear. Grandma let out a big sigh. Around here, people know better than to steal from an old lady, especially me. She walked into the kitchen, filled a pot with water and Navajo tea, and lit the stove pilot. Get me that big pot down and take that mutton from the icebox. I'm making you a welcome home feast. The broth boiled and hissed, steam coiling up from the corn and meat. Grandma and I sat on the kitchen table drinking our hot tea. It reminded me of how wonderful it was to be a child again, to be here with Grandma without the weight of the city upon my shoulders. I wanted to stay forever in these walls, all at the bottom of the mountain, for as long as I lived. You really have grown. Look at you. Grandma held onto my forearm. Grandma, you see me all the time? I said, but not here in this house. I only remember you as a little girl, and seeing you here sitting on the table with me just makes me realize how many years have slipped by. What are your plans? When does school start? I don't think I'm going to go to school right now. I was afraid to look at her. I think I'll stay here with you for a semester before I go back. I just need a break. There was an awkward silence. You're not staying here, Rita? Grandma took a sip of her tea. You're going to school just like you planned? Aren't you going to California? Aren't you going to study your picture taking? That's what I always thought you wanted. I didn't accept the scholarship, Grandma. Not the one in California. I thought Mom would still be alive. Now that she was gone, I honestly didn't know what I was going to do. I'm supposed to start in Albuquerque in the fall. When was all this decided? Grandma looked disappointed. When Mom was getting real sick. I didn't want to be too far from her in case something happened. I wouldn't be able to afford to come back from California, but I guess that doesn't matter now. It's done. And I'll be closer to you, Grandma. I'll be closer to home. The only things that could be heard were the sizzle of the liquid on the stove and the tickling of Grandma's scarecrow clock. His arm hitched up on an aging yellow corn stalk. I could feel that scarecrow looking down at me from the wall as if it barely was able to recognize my face after 10 years away. I looked at the table, at Grandma's beautiful hands, the soft skin now draped and dotted with age. Her jawline remained straight and refined. Her hair was still perfect, coiled into pin curls. She sat with her hands folded, her eyes closed as if in prayer. I reached for the Hasselblad on the chair at my side and sat in on the table, pulling out wide. My finger pressed the shutter, capturing the moment, the memory forever fused into film. The click opened her eyes. You and that camera, she laughed. Do me a favor and go into my closet and pull out the trunk. I think it's time. Time for what? Time to show you. Grandma's closet was just as I remembered it. Handmade dresses on quilted hangers, boxes of sewing patterns. Even my hiding spot was intact. When Grandma's brown leather train case serving as my seat in the corner. As I pulled down worn boxes and scuffed shoes, I came to a green trunk with brass corners and thick leather handle. I had to use all the leverage I had to get out of the closet. Whatever was inside was hefty, memories, maybe. Grandma sat on the bed opposite me. Her fragile hands opened the trunk, releasing a million bright speckles of dust into the light of her window. Inside there were boxes, notebooks, and photo albums, pictures randomly escaping from book covers. On top, there was a picture of Grandpa smiling, his eyes squinting at the camera, the single dimple on his cheek that I remembered from his light. He was handsome in his army uniform, pressed and crisp, every hair in place. He stood by a giant shelf of shiny bottles and containers. Grandma took the photo out and stared at it for almost a whole minute before she laid it on her nightstand. There must have been 1,000 photographs in that trunk. There were some early photos of relatives that were long gone before I ever came into this world. They wore woven dresses and handmade shirts and pants. Their hair was groomed into tight buns and wrapped with sturdy woolen ties. This is your great-grandfather and great-great-grandmother, Grandma explained. That was my grandma and grandpa. Oh, look at them. They were always so happy together. They would spend hours out on the mesas with their herd of sheep and goats. They had a beautiful garden in Lokachigai with lots of corn and beans and pumpkins. They were never apart from each other. When your great-great-grandpa died after a sickness and infection in his lungs, your great-great-grandma went with him 3 days later. I remember she explained to me in Navajo that she hoped he had taken her lungs with him too, because she no longer wanted to breathe in this world. She cried after him. Grandma kept pulling things from it and gazing at them longingly, reliving her childhood and her past in front of me. A piece of me wanted to look away. Another part of me knew that this could be my one opportunity to understand the mystery of my past and to learn about the ancestors that came before me. Give me that red leather book, Grandma pointed to the corner of the trunk. That was the beginning of it, right here. The outside said Phoenix Indian Boarding School, 1931, in faded gold letters. When Grandma opened it, the pages creaked with anticipation. The years in stored stifling its remembrances, forgetting the feeling of human contact. This is me, this is your grandma, a long time ago. She pointed to a large picture of herself as a younger girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, her hair cut into a bob right above her shoulders. Grandma wore a boxy dress and sagging white socks pushed into black and white saddle shoes. She stood next to an antique camera, the kind with a huge leather bellows and a sort of flash that could catch fire to anything or anyone standing too close to it. A throwback fire from the early days of portraits with their dangerous chemicals and blasts of light. On the other side of the camera was a haggard man, his deformed fingers sticking out of his pocket vest. That was Mr. Wilson. Grandma paused. He taught me how to take pictures. There was a huge space of silence in the room. I was about 7. It wasn't even a year after your great-grandma passed. I had just come in from helping your great-grandpa with the shearing. It was hot, right before summer's end, right before we were going to do the last of the harvesting in the peach orchard. It was a still day, no wind, not a cloud in the sky. We could hear the approaching roar of an engine way out there on the dirt road that led up to the home site. He and I watched as a black car came closer and closer, a huge plume of dust and smoke in its wake, finally coming to a stop near a hogan door. Your great-grandpa came out waving his hand at the dust and smoke that settled around us. We watched as 2 white men with powder white shirts and black ties came up to our home. They held papers and leather satchels. One of them stopped and smiled at me, but I ran away up into the hills. I knew they were there for me. They had come and taken my friend Esther 2 months before, sent her off to school. She never came home, not even in the summer. I haven't seen her since. Grandma shifted in her seat. The bed had no back support, so I moved out of the way and helped her onto the rocking chair. She sat quietly remembering things. I could see her mind at work, her 2 thumbs twiddling in her lap. In the kitchen, the sizzling continued, the walls and windows filling with condensation. I brought up another cup of tea. Grandma sighed and started her story again, her feet up on a footstool. My dad walked up to the hilltop and sat with me as we watched the 2 men sit under a cotton tree. I always wondered what they were saying down there, but Dad was there to tell me that I was going. I don't want you to be stuck in this place all your life, he said. I want you to go and learn about the world. I didn't care about the world. I remember being happy there in the homestead. The water was so pure up by the springs, and we had lots of sheep and land. I did not want to leave, but we walked down the hill together and anyway packed a small flour bag full of my things. Some clothes and tintype of my mother. I was so sad. My father cried and cried too. Got into the black car with two men in ties. My feet hung just over the seat, my toes touching the back of the passenger side where the white man, with teeth the color butter, kept turning around to smile at me, nodding up and down. Grandma set her tea on the floor and slowly started to rock her chair. An hour up the road and we were in Gallup, where the big train would head toward the ocean. The train was gigantic and made of silver. I made my way up to the train with two men on each side of me. I guess they thought I would run away. I thought about it, I'll admit. But when I got on the train, my little flour sack, it was shocking to see 50 or more kids just like me sitting in every aisle. The younger ones who sat up on the front of the train cried, the kind of cry that makes your whole body shake. It didn't look like they could breathe in between. They were saying, I want to go home in Navajo, over and over. It was heartbreaking. Before I knew it, I had tears of my own stinging on my burned cheeks. I sat down in the back row with two brothers who just sat there looking out the window. Their cries would only stop when the little ones fell asleep. Then they would wake up and see where they were and start crying all over again. It was a relief to get to school, to not hear them cry anymore. I really wanted to ask Grandma a million questions, but I knew the story was not over. I wanted to hear about this one picture of Grandma that rested inside the box. The quality was perfect, even though the photos had been taken years ago. I could see the determination in Grandma's eyes. When we got to Phoenix, they took our pictures first. They would bring us all up one by one. That man, Mr. Wilson, would hold a bulb over our heads and take our picture with a flash that would cut through our eyes. I was memorized by the flash and by the big camera. I knew about pictures that in the cities there were cameras that could capture people just as they looked. I think Mr. Wilson could see I was interested. I remember his hands were all curled up at the fingers. He could barely use them. Grandma looked down on her own hands and rubbed them. She stopped rocking. Next, they cut our hair real short. The scissors would slide right beneath our tielle, right under our thick hair, and cut through just like that. She snapped her fingers together like rusty scissors. Go and fall. The rest of our hair would let go and fall around our faces. The boys had theirs cut even shorter, right up to their ear. The girls went through school with their hair short, right above their shoulders, just as the scissors had left us. Then we went back to the room with Mr. Wilson and his camera, and they stood us all against the wall and took our pictures again. They did it so they could make sure all the Navajo had been cut and shaved from all of us. They wanted all of it to be gone. Grandma stopped her story and looked toward the chest. Pull those two boxes out, the ones right there. I moved to the right corner of the chest and grabbed two heavy boxes. Right below was an ancient Plowbell Makina in almost brand new condition with a leather bellows and flawless glass lens and surface. It was like it had pulled from the 1930s. I took the camera out carefully. The viewfinder was a little bent, but I used it anyway to frame Grandma there in her rocking chair. She smiled. That is my camera, she laughed. I guess we all have the bug, don't we? How come I am just learning about this now, Grandma? I held the bulky camera in my lap. It must have weighed at least 20 pounds. I tried to imagine my grandma, her arms young and strong, keeping the camera steady, holding her breath. Mr. Wilson could see that I was absorbed in what he was doing. I watched everything he did, loading the camera, focusing with his crooked fingers, and the painful pressing of the button. He called me over and pulled me out a stool so that I could look through the viewfinder. I could see the two little boys who had traveled here with me in the frame. The image backward but showed their hair still long and tied, their skin still burned by the sun. Mr. Wilson would have to pull the lever down from the front of the camera to take a picture. It was hard on him. You could see the pain in his face every time he snapped the frame. When he saw me watching, he showed me how to work the lever. It was easy for my little fingers, but from then on, I became his assistant. They took me from whichever class I was in every time a new trainload of Indians came to the school. After a while, I did all the work, loading the film, changing the lens, moving the camera around campus. Even though I was a little girl, I knew my way around that big camera. Mr. Wilson died when I was 12. I took all the pictures after that, but it became a chore. Grandma handed me 2 framed photographs of the beautiful Navajo girl. Her skin brown, her hair pulled back. She wore a nice rug dress and moccasins. In the second picture, her long hair was cut to her shoulders. Her beautiful dress replaced with a symmetrical black and white dress, the same one they all wore. I got so tired of watching all the Indian being taken out of these kids one after another, year after year. I felt like I was trapping their souls in a box. As they aged, they had no Indian left in them, just like me. When I finally went home 12 years later, the land had become overgrown, the herd scattered in all different directions. My father had become a shell of a man I left behind. I think when my mom died, he died too. But we stayed here on earth to watch me because he knew I would one day return and would take care of what I needed to take care of. Is that why you don't take pictures anymore? I took pictures for a long time after that until you. He liked to take pictures too, but when he passed, I didn't want to do it anymore. I put that camera away along with all the memories and kept them locked up so I wouldn't cry after him. It made me sad to think of what could have been, of what should have been. The pictures always made me cry for him, and I knew that I had to let him go. I started to put all the boxes, books, and photographs away back into the vault of pain that Grandma kept in her closet. I didn't think I ever wanted to open it again. As I scooted the chest closer to the closet, Grandma stopped me. You missed a box. Up there on the bed, there was one orange box by Grandma's pillow. When I opened it, my cousin Gloria with her long, shiny hair and her infectious smile. I remembered that day. She was really happy. We sat on the roof until it was dark and the neighbors' dogs began to howl. We took that picture from her friend's Polaroid right before the sunset. It was 2 weeks before she died. The truck was full of ghosts, full of brimming pain and loss. I stuffed Gloria's picture into my pocket and closed the box. Grandma's picture stayed on the nightstand. It was a memory that could probably enjoy, I thought. Grandpa could look after her. After digging through the trunk, Grandma grew tired. I helped her to bed, brushing her long white hair and massaging her hands with her magic rub, as she called it. It was a Bengay ripoff that smelled terrible. But Grandma didn't mind it, kept the pain in her hands away. She called the pain arthralgia, the Navajo personification of arthritis, and cursed him every night as she rubbed heat into her skin. Damn him, she'd say. After I turned off her light, she was asleep. Then 10 minutes. I sat outside on the porch beside her western door, the one that flooded with rainwater all the time, and watched the sun go down beneath the mountains. Shame enveloped me. Seeing Grandma living alone in her outdated house made me feel sick and lonely. I wanted to bring her with me, but where? Albuquerque wouldn't be safe for her. I needed a drive to clear my head, to do something besides sit in the house and watch TV. Grandma's keys hung on the nail in her kitchen. I grabbed them in my camera bag and walked to the truck. One blank frame remained on the roll of film inside my mother's Hasselblad, and I hope I could find the final photo somewhere tonight. Wishing that it might close a chapter, I needed to let go of this weight, to find something that could give me hope for my future and the wisdom to cope with my ghosts. The engine sputtered as I turned the key, turning over after a couple of chokes. I drove down the road from the house, dodging a few packs of stray dogs and an occasional pothole. The house had become unkept. Many of the tribal government homes replaced with trailers and model homes with fake adobe and white frames. The trading post was closed, and so was the park where Gloria and I would swing. The town was becoming a memory too, with all of Grandma's friends leaving the world one by one, replaced with kids and grandkids that didn't want to be there. I could see why Grandma wanted to leave, to put behind me the history of this place. I drove through town slowly until my eyes called out for sleep. But I didn't want to go home. Instead, I thought of Gloria. I thought of that white house on the mesa where I saw her alive. I wondered if it still stood, if the things that happened there were cemented into the walls. I was compelled to drive up Choshkai Hill to see if it still mocked me with that one childhood photograph that I could not burn. I sat in the distance, standing defiantly. The outside was covered in graffiti, color over color. I drove right up to it, directing the headlights at the front door, and got out. I fished a pack of cigarettes out my backpack and my mom's Zippo lighter that she kept with her camera bag. I had no flashlight, so this had to be my torch. I walked to the front door and kicked it open, flooding the walls with the silver light of the headlamps. The elements had taken their toll. The wind whistled through the bare walls, an occasional pink wisp of insulation. On the back of the door were the marks I had left all those years ago. When I raged, trying to set myself free, you could still see where I had banged on the wood until it began to splinter. That is when I saw her. "Rita, what are you doing here?" She was smiling. "It's too late for you to be up here." Her hair was long and straight, her skin a perfect olive hue. I started to walk toward her, inching toward the warmth of her voice. Then just as suddenly as I saw her, she disappeared through the rays of the headlights. I came out of that house and I cried. I had received my answer. The night still haunted me. I reached out to the back of my grandma's truck and pulled out her nearly empty gas can. I sprayed the walls, the insulation, the sink, what counters remained. I sprayed more of the trash-covered floors and on the doors and hallways in the back. But mostly I sprayed the front door, the door that had kept me locked in, that still held evidence of my fear. I stepped outside when I scraped the Zippo's wheel. The light shone on my face and on the cigarette in my mouth. I took a deep drag, feeling the smoke down my throat, finding its way to my lungs. I walked to the door and threw the cigarette in it. The light flickered and grew. Within 15 minutes, the entire house was engulfed, sending the splintered wood and bloodstains into the sky. I pulled Mom's Hasselblad out of the truck and rested it on the cab as the fingers of the fire swayed. the smoke trapped under the eaves. The house was choking and dying in front of me, and all I could think of was that picture. I wanted to remember the unaliving of this house for the rest of my life. I wanted to see its evil soul lifted into the permanency of eternity. If this curse had to stay with me, I prayed that this purge could bring me some peace. The fire had become perfectly balanced, the flames and smoke turning the white paint into the dead shade of gray. I looked at it, the house, in the viewfinder and pressed the shutter release. The photograph, the last memory, finally dead.